My name is Zach. I'm the community manager and developer relations lead here at Bristlemouth. And I'm also an engineer at Sofar. Today, we're going to jump right in. We've got a lot to cover. We skipped last month's tag up in order to focus on this one because we had a lot to say and not everything was fully baked. So thanks for your patience there. And thanks to everybody who reached out to us on the forums and other channels to get your questions answered and kind of keep things moving or just to keep us updated on your progress with Bristlemouth. It's been really encouraging to see. So thanks to everybody on the forums. A special shout out to Eric Stackpole and all his hard work on the adventure that he's allowing us to join in on, integrating an animal tracker over RS-485 using Bristlemouth. Really cool. Encourage everybody to go check that out. A couple of things have happened since our last tag up, and I'll just mention those really quickly. We've released our generic RS-232 serial integration guide. We're spiritually calling this guide 6, but it's actually the first of what is hopefully many of these kind of lighthouse examples that are really useful if you're wanting to get some data out of the system quickly. Go check that out under the docs section. Evan will actually be telling us a little bit more about those later, so I'll introduce him at the end here. We now have special spare parts and extra parts available. Sofar has allowed us to kind of get this direct purchase going. So if you have anything you need to help you prototype or you want to make seconds of anything, please let me know. A good friend of mine, Walt Holm, always says 2 is 1, 1 is none when you're dealing with ocean work. So if you need spares, direct message me on the forum, send us an email at support@sofarocean.com or zach@sofarocean.com. That's ZSCK. We announced that experiment.com has these fast grants. The wonderful and famous David Lang from experiment.com is putting up, I think it's up to 10K. And these are, as he describes it, something you can get like immediately. And I think it's pretty fast and aptly named fast grants. So if you're doing underwater sensor development, not every Bristlemouth or Pioneer user is, but if you are, head over, there's a forum post and you can also go to experiment.com and find those. I want to thank again, it's everyone who's been contributing on the forums. It's been really nice to see that growing and hear about all the really cool projects going on. And then lastly, me and some of the other folks in the ocean community are going to be at Oceanology International in London. If you're in the area, please come say hi. And then we'd love to chat and hear about your Bristlemouth project in person. If you're able to do that, there'll be some other events later this year, other opportunities elsewhere. So keep an eye on the events section of the forum. I'm going to hand it over to Evan. Evan is the CTO of Sofar and more or less the kind of the Moses of our journey through the integration desert here. And he has been working on a lot of things regarding roadmap and an upcoming developer sprint. So I want to turn it over to him, and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A, and we'll kind of try to get through this stuff pretty quick so we can leave time for that. So thank you all for your attention. Evan, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Zach. Let me see if I can share my screen. All right. Is the full screen coming through to everyone? Great. I'm just going to run through like 5 minutes of updates and next up, and then we'll turn it over to everyone for Q&A. So just a little context when we think about where we are overall in Bristlemouth development. We're in this early phase of community adoption. So we have lots of people who have received Pioneer program development kits. We have other customers and other folks outside of Sofar who are now getting their hardware and really starting to dig into it. And what we're going to be focused on for the rest of this year is this community adoption growth, which is going to make it more better, more easier, do all the things for all of the projects that need Bristlemouth to get what they need out of the ocean. So internally in Sofar, Internally and so far, the beginning of this year has been really focused on launching new products in the Bristlemouth ecosystem. So I'm very excited to say that starting in April, every single piece of kit, every hardware sensor module that Sofar produces commercially is going to be a Bristlemouth-enabled device. This will be a big boost to the initial ecosystem. We have Spotter, which most of you are very familiar with at this point, which is a lightweight surface telemetry module. We'll also have now some first sensor modules that are compatible with the Bristlemouth ecosystem. So that's an RBR CODA adapter. So you can take any RBR CODA sensor and plug it into Bristlemouth. It's a Xylem and Dara Doppler current sensor. So for applications that need to have a current measurement as part of their sensing suite, you'll be able to plug and play that in. And then, of course, there's the Bristlemouth Dev Kit, which lets integrators and early developers prototype and get experiments in the water with whatever they can imagine. At the same time frame, once we launch these products, our focus will shift internally to Bristlemouth tools and technology outside of the ecosystem products. So there's a continuous train of documentation effort. Please keep posting in the forums. Don't be shy about telling us where you got stuck. If something seems underdocumented, don't give us the benefit of the doubt. It probably is. Just let us know where it seems like there's a lack of information. We're collecting all of it, and you will start to see documentation updates roll out that will make it easier for new users to get onboarded with Bristlemouth. So a rough list of priorities here. This is going to be coming out in the next week. A more comprehensive firmware update guide, which walks you through the considerations around updating various nodes in a Bristlemouth application, including some Sofar Spotter specific considerations around compatibility and features and how we're tracking updates. There'll be a more detailed dev kit user guide. So right now, the way that you as a user understand what the dev kit's capabilities are you can look at the schematics and a spec sheet and source code. You can look at examples, but we don't have this detailed user guide, user manual experience that really focuses on the features and capabilities from a user standpoint at a detailed level. And that's being worked on and is coming. For all of our products, and we are encouraging anyone else who's developing a module that is intended to be reused in the Bristlemouth ecosystem, we are also working on Bristlemouth user guides. So we can imagine how a user might want to interact with something like Spotter, and it has a variety of features and APIs and configurations. And if we have a user guide that's focused on Bristlemouth users, that really covers the interface. How do you log to the SD card? How much data can I log to the SD card? How much data can I log to a telemetry message over satellite or cellular? What are all the Spotter specific features? And then finally, there is the Bristlemouth developer guides. So these are more now abstracted away from any particular module or product. This is what tells you how, as a developer, to set up a pub sub or a rec rep interface, how the configuration management system works. More abstracted than, hey, look at the source code and read the code comments. But more detailed than the lightweight user guides that only tell you how certain flows or use cases will work. All of this is staged and some level of in the works. I expect it will roll out in this general sequence, and I certainly also expect that it'll take several months before we make it through most of this list. There's a lot of folks who are contributing to this documentation, but we do not have a full-time technical writer or documentation team on Bristlemouth. So we're also, anyone who discovers something and writes it down in a nice forum post, that is very valuable because our team will take that and immediately put it into the public docs so that others can reuse more easily. Development. So outside of the documentation as a means to easier accessibility of Bristlemouth, we have a sprint that'll be starting in April that is focused on developer accessibility. And what this means is we are prioritizing the issues, the features, the gaps in the Bristlemouth user experience that are driven more from a mismatch between someone's experience and skills as a embedded firmware developer and what they need to do. So these are things like making it easier to use other common prototyping platforms, Arduino's, Raspberry Pi's, other application processors folks may be comfortable with. Right now, we're asking people to take a dive into the very deep end of real-time operating systems on single processor embedded cores, and there's a lot of considerations, there's a lot of gotchas. We're there to help whenever you run into one of them, but we want people to be able to be more autonomous eventually. These are also things like features that make it easier to troubleshoot systems. So firmware update flows or telemetry features, and how do you access your data over the API easily? How do you tell if you tried to send a message to a device and we want to have a request reply interface where there's a ACK or a failure confirmation, how do we start getting that scaffolding in place? And then we're also, as Zach mentioned, working on lots of application examples. So if you check out the forums now, you'll see some really cool threads on folks who are doing camera integrations, and you can follow along their progress and the details of what they're doing. You'll see Eric, who's also on this call, is doing a Innova-C, which used to be Venco fish tag receiver integration, which is really cool. So now we can imagine having fish tag receivers on any Bristlemouth system. These are useful things in their own right, but they're also now showing examples of how do you integrate a half duplex RS-45 sensor, or how do you integrate an application that's talking to a Raspberry Pi that's driving a camera. So they're good technical references for broader applications. They're also really useful projects to copy and paste into your own applications. Outside of these more tangible feature-focused things, there's an effort that's underway right now, which is to refactor the way that the open source repositories are structured. So it'll be easier and more scalable for people to create independent projects. Right now, we have a mono repo, so everything really is in this one BM protocol repo. There's a couple sub-modular repos like core messages, but the core networking layer through the board support package for the processors that we're using today, through the initial development kit applications, all of those are in a single repository. There's benefits to that, to be able to get started in a small project and move quickly and make sure that things are working together. But as we imagine scaling through the rest of this year and beyond, we're also anticipating that becomes a hindrance where somebody wants to deploy Bristlemouth applications onto a different processor. And now how do we ensure there's compatibility between those two different things? So this is going to be largely under the hood work that Pioneer program developers aren't going to have to worry about in their own projects, but it will be an enabler to people who are already wanting to put Bristlemouth on a different processor or use parts of the protocol stack, but not the application framework. So if that's something that's already circling in your head, please do let us know, because we'd love to get feedback from you as we are in this early stage of designing how the open source code ecosystem is going to work. All right, and that leads into this first sprint where we're really focused on unsticking folks who are stuck. We want to hear from you. So this might be things that are squarely on track with some of those previous ideas that I shared of like, oh, I really want to connect to Raspberry Pi. And wouldn't it be cool if I could just call Bristlemouth publish from Python in my Raspberry Pi and everything else was handled automatically? But it also might be things that are features that we don't have today, like a file transfer protocol. We're not going to be tackling those core capability features in this sprint that's starting in April, but we will be addressing core capability features in the sprint later this summer. That'll be a large focused effort to add more capabilities to the Bristlemouth protocol. Hardware is also in scope for that. So we are already starting to explore things like Ethernet adapters and hubs and power module interfaces. So the ask here is anything that you can imagine that is a sticking point for your project, or you imagine, hey, I really need this to get my project over the line, please let us know. There's a screenshot here and a link. Zach started a thread. Yeah, is there a question? Cool. So there's a screenshot here. There's a thread started in the community forums, and it would be great if you all can think about your wish list of what you'd hope for in features or tools or documentation. And we'll also be reaching out to folks individually to set up quick feedback, even interviews if people have time for that. All right, so I'll stop the screen share there. And we can, I think, hand it over to general Q&A now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Evan. I'll be kind of watching the chat window here. If anybody wants to type something in, I think you should, as a guest, be able to unmute yourself and just let it fly out. I also want to say, yeah, if you have any of those suggestions, now is a great time to bring them up. But this is also a good time if you just have general questions for us or want to talk a little bit about your project. Almost always someone else has the same question that you might as well. So it's very valuable. Yeah, taking any volunteers.
Hi, this is Ron. Can you guys hear me okay?
Hey, Ron, good to hear you. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing okay, thanks. So you guys, I've written in the forum before about, the work that we're doing at the university that I'm at, just bare bones. We're just getting started with building some submersibles. And as a matter of fact, I'm building that first one right now, very basic, no smarts, but I'm already gathering parts for the next one, which is going to have a Raspberry Pi in it. And so I'm interested in that part of it because I'd like to explore the idea of using Bristlemouth as part of the kind of the net of the network of pieces that I can use to control thrusters and cameras and all that kind of stuff. And so I just to kind of say I'm interested in that part of it. So I don't know exactly where that fits in with the timeline right now, but I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about in that regard. And I'll put something into that topic as well that you started up there, Zach. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, Ron. Yeah, it's a big topic. Evan, I think you might be able to kind of describe a little bit where stuff like that might live on the roadmap. And
yeah. So I can give a little more detail to that. There is a so the Bristlemouth network stack is focused on IP frames. It right now works has full implementation for a physical layer that is this amazing 2-wire Ethernet protocol with power and data modulated on the same lines, and we get a 10 megabit PHY rate for that. The downside to that specific PHY layer is that nothing in the makerspace or robotic space uses it today. There are some like Adafruit tools that use this 10T1L. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in automotive and in industry and robotics where people are very interested in this, but it's a relatively new thing. So when we think about traditional single board computer or prototyping or makerspace platforms like a Raspberry Pi, they're predominantly Ethernet and serial protocols like UART or SPI. We also recognize that while the code that goes onto our processor is fully open source, and we've built this sandboxed development framework around it where you can write your own applications on the processor directly, we don't want to tell people that that is how you get a camera on Bristlemouth. Like when you can get a Raspberry Pi and get a camera running on it in an hour, and it would take an embedded engineering team, proper weeks, months to get that running on our processor with a lot of very professional levels of effort exerted. We are pursuing this bridge between Bristlemouth and other common platforms. And so specifically what that looks like is you can imagine our moat that has the Bristlemouth connections. It also has serial connections. So it has UART, it has SPI, it has USB, and we will be building on top of a library that already exists but is not documented for use at all, called Bristlemouth Serial. And this is implementing Bristlemouth on these serial transport layers. It's also building reference APIs for select platforms. We already have enough feedback where I'm pretty confident Raspberry Pi will be at the top of that list. Raspberry Pi and Arduino are likely to be the reference platforms that we implement. So what you can imagine is that you have a Raspberry Pi and you've got a Bristlemouth mote that's connected to a Bristlemouth network. You have a serial connection between these two things where you wire them together, but then you don't have to put any of your business logic on the Bristlemouth mote. There is a library in the Raspberry Pi that says Bristlemouth publish topic data, or on Bristlemouth receive topic callback function. So you can have your camera application running and very quickly put in some Bristlemouth functions directly into that camera application on a Raspberry Pi to interact with other nodes on the Bristlemouth network without having to get into the mote embedded processing at all. Downsides to this approach are really the bandwidth limitations. So the serial data pipes are going to be more bandwidth constraints, generally 1 to 2 megabits, than the total Bristlemouth network capability on that 10T1L link. That will certainly be relevant for any application that wants to try and stream image data. For file transfer, it should generally be okay. It'll slow things down a bit. There's a future build, which is not in scope for this upcoming sprint, but we already have some folks who are working on the architecture, which is a Bristlemouth to Ethernet adapter. So this is your RJ45 Ethernet connector on one end and a Bristlemouth connector on the other end. And that's a properly unconstricted limit where you get full 10 megabits through. Then you could connect to the Ethernet port on a Raspberry Pi and immediately extend the network that way. But that's a much longer project. That's not going to be launched this year, but it is something that we're excited about launching next year.
Cool. We got a question from, thank you, Evan, by the way. Ron, thank you for that question. I suspect Eric and Charles and some of the other RFV folks on the forum will be happy to entertain your question about modular design. I know that's a big thing that they want to push forward industry-wide for this smaller RFV classes. A quick question from Alan, and one I can answer, so I'm excited. I'm going to take the first half and then I'll pass it to Evan for the second half. But power management for turning on and off a sensor, that's an excellent feature to utilize, especially for remote applications. So you're not chewing to your battery or overloading the solar panels capability to recharge on the spotter. Right now that's covered in guide 5 towards the bottom. And essentially what we're doing is we're toggling on and off the bridge, which is the little piece of PCB and firmware that controls the entire Bristlemouth system. So you kind of cycle that on and off as per your spec. All that's outlined in guide 5. I think we call back to it again in guide 6. But right now that's kind of like the best power management solution we have, because if you leave the motes running, they're going to be, their quiescent draw at this time is still a little high, and so you'll want to cycle the whole system on and off. Super safe to do, super easy to do. The second half of your question is satellite one-way messaging. I might let Evan answer that because there is some nuance to it present.
Yeah, and so yeah, as Zach said on the power question, what we do in our systems right now is we duty cycle the entire bus. That's different than sending a command to a sensor. There is, if you look at the RS-232 serial integration guide, there is an example there of how you can, from your mote application, enable and disable a connected payload. Okay. There's also examples of how you can set configurations in a Bristlemouth supported framework, and this kind of ties into the satellite messaging a little bit. First thing is, if you are imagining an application where you want to have a mote or a Bristlemouth node that is always alive, always able to receive some signal and react to it, please start a forum post on that. There is a path to that, but we don't have that well supported today, but we can walk folks through how to kind of duct tape it together with the tools that are enabled today. If you're imagining an application where you're okay with some control of turning things on or off, where it's
the weekly check-in.
Oh, hang on, Vince. I'm just going to give you the mute here.
So that's where we already have a mechanism in place for periodic power control. So from the spotter, you can set up timing to turn sensors on for a little bit at whatever cadence you want. You can change those configurations remotely. The satellite messaging is two-way. We do have a robust two-way configuration synchronization system in place. So there you can make local changes to a system's configuration, you can make remote changes to the system's configuration, and there are mechanisms in the spotter and in the Sofar backend. These are outside of the core Bristlemouth tech. There are mechanisms to make sure these things stay in sync so that you have an accurate reflection of your local system's configuration remotely and that you can mutate those. What we don't have today are the client-facing APIs that let users access those directly. So please also post this in the forums as a thing that we want to be able to control configurations remotely without having to contact Sofar support and ask them to change settings on our system. That is a pretty simple thing to do, and if folks are anticipating needing and using that, we'll certainly put it up on the list of these accessibility features. A related feature is the cellular-only data. So some folks did dig in under the hood and found the scaffolding that we put in place in firmware to send transmissions through Spotter that are only allowed to go through cellular. The benefit of that is you don't risk falling back to Iridium, which is burns through credits pretty quickly, it's pretty expensive, and you can send larger payloads. This is another thing that is in scope for this upcoming sprint of allowing the web access of this data. Right now, the firmware and the backend scaffolding is all there, but we don't have the client-facing APIs that allow users to access this data. That'll be happening in the next couple of months.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the good question there, Alan. I've just posted in the chat the first section that this shows up on. We had a question from Vince about how to ask questions. Yeah, this is a good way to do it. Forums asynchronously is awesome. So I'm really excited you get a whole classroom looking at this. This is really great. We have time for probably one, two, if we let it linger a little bit long here in the meeting. If anyone out there has a question for us. All right, Wayne, I cannot hear you, but I do read your question here. ADCP current meter, okay, exciting. Just reviewing the documentation, awesome, yeah. So we're hopefully, I think that's a really cool application. ADCPs are really difficult to use in general, and I think last time we talked, it sounded like you had some handle on that. Yeah, please let us know. Keep us updated on the forum. You know how things are going there. I didn't see a question there. I'm sorry if I missed that. But we do have time for one more probably.
Yeah, I'm reading through Wayne's comment in the chat. Interfacing the ADCP with Bristlemouth using serial is not going to be a bottleneck or a blocker. Where you might run into constraints is the spotter as your power and telemetry product. ADCPs generally are pushing the envelope of what spotter can support in terms of power. So that's where I would, if you can dig in and figure out what your requirements are and start posting on the forums to see if it might be constrained, that's where I would focus, is on how much power does it consume. Has its own power source, so that's great, that checks that one off. But then it's what is the effective bit rate, the bandwidth of data that you want to transmit out of the system. Bristlemouth as a technology can handle 10 megabits per second. Spotter as a telemetry module cannot. And so that's where we should make sure that those things are aligned. The things that will let folks answer this more self-served are covered in the Bristlemouth product documentation that's in the works on Spotter.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the context there, Evan, and all of the wonderful updates. Super excited to see some of this. Unless there's a last minute question, I think we'll wrap it up here. We'll place the recording on the sign up sheet and our sign up webpage, and there'll also be a post in the forum. We'll pick this back up at our regularly scheduled cadence next month because we'll have a lot more of this information digested and maybe some public facing documentation for you guys to follow along. And we're always looking for new ways to incorporate feedback to make it easier for everyone out there, especially the folks on this call, to interface with us in the way that they want. So some of those suggestions could be meta, like, hey, I'm in Europe. This is really hard for me to attend at the midnight or whatever. Just let us know how we can do this better. We're really trying to establish a community-driven development approach and a community-driven community management approach. So please let us know if there's anything you can think of that you'd like to contribute, help out with, or you'd like to see happen a little differently, a little bit better. Otherwise, we're going to leave it there. Thank you guys so much for your time today. It's always great to see everyone show up and continue to stay engaged and all the wonderful progress that we're seeing on the forums. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Evan, for your time today. And Zachary, I hate to put you on the spot for closing remarks, but is there anything you wanted to add? Our lead firmware engineer.
No, thanks. I am just so happy to see everybody here, and it's really exciting to read about all the projects that are coming, and I look forward to helping out any way I can.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week.